It's a great pleasure to be here today and to talk to you, and it's very nice to see some friends. The topic of my presentation today is how to deal with a fast-growing organization in the Global South. And here you have my details and my email if you want to get in touch after. So let's start talking about the Global South because it's a new term that not everybody is familiar with. So the Global South refers to low and middle income countries, and it came to replace previous terms such as the poorest parts of the world or the developing world. Why did we decide to focus on the Global South? Well, one of the key reasons is because it is where meat consumption, the consumption of animal products is growing the most as middle classes are expanding. And as we know it, this will have or is already having very bad impacts on animals. And when we look back some years ago, there were hardly any organizations working in many of these countries. And currently, we still receive much less resources and funding, especially when compared to North America and Europe. We also focus on neglectedness, which means that we focus in countries of the Global South where no other or very few other organizations are using the same strategies that we use. And as my presentation is about growth, I will start by giving you an overview of what happened in the last 4 years. So we started in late 2017 with 2 people, and currently we have 52 people. That represents a growth of 26 times. And in terms of funding, we grew by 48 times during the same period. In terms of our geographic expansion, we started working only in South America. So we started working in Brazil, Argentina, and Colombia, and Chile, sorry. Currently, we also have people in Ecuador and Peru, and a team of very dedicated volunteers in Uruguay. And in 2019, we also expanded to Southeast Asia, and we have teams now in Thailand and Indonesia. In terms of programs, we started working only with cage-free campaigns to reduce suffering, but nowadays we also have food policy programs to reduce meat consumption and promote veganism. We do investigations to raise awareness and also support our campaigns. We work with public and private financial institutions, encouraging them to adopt animal welfare criteria in their lending policy. And this year, we are very excited about it. We are going to have a re-granting program. So we are planning to fund individuals or existing organizations to increase their capacity to work with farmed animals. And that's going to be done both in Latin America and in Asia. So if you know people who would be interested, please get in touch. And I have to say that like all this diversity of programs and growth was pretty much supported by the fact that we were considered a standout charity by Animal Charity Evaluators in 2018. You can see a woman crying there. It's not me, but it could have been. So for us, it was huge. Like we were a team of 4 people, 3 of us being part-time, and it was almost like impossible to believe that it was happening. And as we are talking about the very beginning, let me give you some more facts about it. So as I said, we were founded in late 2017 to work in South American countries where no other or very few other organizations were using pressure campaigns to get welfare reforms. So we started in Brazil, Chile, Colombia, and Argentina. We were a tiny team of multitaskers doing everything from corporate engagement to pressure campaigns, investigations, volunteer engagement, and demonstrations. And I really love this picture because here we have 3 of our founders. At the same time, we were conducting investigations, so we decided we should wear masks. And also because it became very repetitive, we had the same 3 people on pictures all the time. This is our team today, 2022. And as I said before, we never imagined we would go this big. And I think one of the things that made us be very effective from the very beginning was that we always believed we would be able to create big change even by being so small. So positivity became a very important value in the organization. And talking about believing in change, it's something that is very special for me as well. As you can see it here, I grew up in the countryside of São Paulo state, spending my holidays in cattle farms, riding horses, and I used to go to rodeo parties as well. My luck is that my head has always been very big, so I couldn't find hats to wear. So I'm not wearing one there. And what really changed me were investigations. So I am a journalist, and I ended up working with undercover investigations for 10 years. It took me to 30 different countries where I didn't see only animals suffering. I saw indigenous communities being destroyed, wild animals being killed, local environments being changed, and forests being devastated because of our appetite for animal products. That, of course, changed my life forever, and it made the fight against factory farming the cause that I want to dedicate myself to. The world of investigations is tough, but it surely taught me some very important things that I still carry with me. And I think these things were also, it helped us a lot. They helped us a lot to be a successful organization from the very beginning. So I was giving very challenging assignments many times. I didn't have holidays because I was a freelance. And at the age of 32, my mother told me she was sure I was going to go crazy. So one of the first values we had was that we wanted to be a fair organization and we wanted to give people good working conditions. As I said before, positivity is also a very important value. I actually learned during investigations that when you enter a place with a lot of confidence and believing that you're going to get something, it often works. So we use that a lot as well when we train our campaigners. And one other very important thing is to accept risks. I think if you start something new, and especially if you start something in countries where no one has tried anything similar before, you have to take some risks. Otherwise, it would be very difficult to succeed. And the last thing is that I participated in very long and costly investigations that were never published or used, and that was, of course, very frustrating. So I became very conscious of how to use resources, and that's also why we decided to only work with interventions that have already been tested by other animal protection organizations in different parts of the world, because we believed they could work in the Global South with some adaptations. We also used some things to make us look more powerful than we were in the beginning. So we got celebrities to record at least one video or one of our investigations when we started in these countries. In most of them, it was not possible in some. That was very helpful. It was the first time the industry was being exposed. There were strong reactions, especially on conservative media. So it was good to have someone well-known to back us up. And I often get asked by groups who are starting how we could run so many protests from the very beginning and how we could have very great and engaged communities of volunteers. And the truth is we did not. We would do it ourselves. We would beg family members and close friends to go. And many times we paid local artists to protest for us. So here you can see circus artists protesting in Argentina. Oh, sorry. And here are yoga teachers performing in Chile. And usually, like, these small but very creative interventions were able to get us coverage on mainstream media. As we grew, the situation with volunteer communities didn't change that much, I have to say. These countries have very small communities of supporters. The movement is very young and very small. So we still use a lot of resources. Now that we have more resources, we can do things like billboards and ads on tuk-tuks, boats, and trucks. And they have helped a lot with our campaigns. And in terms of funding and strategy, I think one of the things that we did right as well is that we studied a lot of the funding opportunities that are available at the moment, and we tried to follow the principles of effective altruism from the very beginning. And I think that explains a lot of the quick growth as well. Should be next one. Transparency was always a very important value. So we did have many challenges, like we had countries, for example, where we couldn't hire people for 1 full year, and that really slowed our capacity to use our funds. So we were very transparent with donors, and I think that helped create a lot of trust. And we made some mistakes as well. Let me just get here. Yeah, so some of the mistakes we made were related to alignment. So recruiting for us is always a big challenge. It's hard to find vegans, or it's hard to find people who are even willing to take this type of jobs in some of these countries. So we became we didn't have very good recruiting techniques, and we started recruiting people just when they were vegan, or when they would say they were vegan. They would go vegan to be in their organization. And we didn't find time to share our strategy and mission with them. Actually, we asked them to read our strategic plan, and later on we found out that they didn't. And we had a lot of people, well, not a lot, but many people inside the organization who didn't agree with our mission and with our values, and that created a lot of conflicts. So now the reading of the strategic plan is mandatory. It's part of our onboarding process. And we also have many internal talks, and we invite external experts to talk about things such as the principles of effective altruism. I think it's important to say as well that we cannot expect everybody to be aligned because of the state of the movement. But we did learn that if we make things very clear from the very beginning, it can work. One other good thing is that I think we have been able to set realistic goals. It was very common when people started working with us that they would compare themselves or the situation of the country where we were working at with countries like the US and Europe. And that is surely a mistake. The situation is very different, so you have to be very careful at setting realistic goals. So the way we work with goals now is that they are realistic, they are hard to achieve, but somewhat possible. One area that we are trying to get better at is also to get people to experience higher levels of engagement and enjoyment at work. So as we can see on this chart here, when we can match people's abilities with new challenges that they're capable of facing, it brings them to a very positive state of mind, and they experience things like happiness and confidence. But our experience, especially because we work with very young teams is that people will feel anxious and concerned when you present them with challenges. So we have some interventions that we are already studying to increase their confidence and make them more aware that challenges are not a bad thing. Another topic that we had some positive and somewhat negative experiences with is the topic of dealing with different cultures. So in the beginning, we thought that if our leaders spent a lot of time in these countries and a lot of time with our national teams, we could fully understand their culture. And that's not true. It doesn't happen that way. So one thing that we recently did, and it was very powerful, and I wish we had done it before, was to conduct cross-cultural training. So these courses are about differences in communication styles, tone, body language, and work ideals. And they usually help people feel seen, understood, and empathetic towards their co-workers, no matter where they are. So highly recommended. We also have very young leadership. I would say that most of our leaders have never been in a similar position before. So one of the things we learned is that our leaders need a lot of training too. In the beginning, our leaders often felt insecure about how to say things that needed to be said, or they said it in very hard ways, and that created problems. So we invested time and resources in a very long training covering topics like nonviolent communication, effective feedback, and how to carry out performance evaluation. And Canva shouldn't be there. And as the organization keeps growing, we have noticed that leadership training will be a continuous thing. Now we are dealing with bigger teams and more challenging situations. And one thing that we find very helpful as well is to invest in practices that develop emotional intelligence. So why is that? It's probably what leaders need the most in our experience. So research has shown that emotional intelligence is one of the strongest predictors of performance, with around 90% of top performers exhibiting high levels of it. And leaders with emotional intelligence will have a better ability to coach their teams, isolate negativity, which is a very common thing, stay more calm under pressure, resolve conflicts, and they are more likely to respond with empathy as well. One other area that we are developing is training on what is called transformational leadership. And it is a program that can develop things such as charisma, the ability to transform complex ideas into simple messages, a leadership style that encourages teams to adopt and accept changes. Changes are usually a big problem, for us at least. I don't know how it is for you. And also the promotion of innovative solutions to existing problems. And treat people as individuals and understand their needs and how to coach them. For a young organization, where the movement is very small, you will surely need a lot of training for your teams as well. So in the beginning, it was very messy, and we got many complaints that people didn't know what they were meant to do, or how to behave in different situations. So we fixed that with a very long onboarding process, which is run on a professional platform now. We also give them a development allowance so they can choose the courses that they need to take that would empower them the most according to their own experience. And we invest regularly on skill development for the whole organization and team training. Some things that really helped us as well with the growth and so many people coming at different times is to have like templates with checkup lists, regular reviews of plans and goals and objectives with leaders, and many manuals as well that can be consulted for different things. One thing that I often say, what I learned as a leader, is that repetition will be needed. Lots of repetition will be needed. We are all like babies when we are learning, all of us. And the other thing is that mistakes will happen. So the best way we found to deal with it is to tell people that mistakes are okay and they should be open about it so we can learn all together. And we also found that it would be very nice to create culture pillars for the organization. We had a lot of problems with alignment in the beginning. So we defined our culture pillars as being safe, inclusive, nonviolent, empowering, results-oriented, focused on the Global South, innovative, and amicable. We have a full document on it. And the way, if you wanted to see, if you would like to see it, and the way we work with it is that we have feedback cycles every 3 months, and the feedback cycle is focused on what we expect from people having our culture pillars as a reference. The reason why we decided to adopt it, it was also because research shows that a healthy culture allows companies, we don't have research for the for the nonprofit sector, but in the private sector, you will have companies growing 1.5 times faster if they have a healthy working culture and pillars. And it's also one of the top indicators of employee satisfaction. We are also considered to be a more diverse and inclusive organization than the average in the movement. So I will share with you what happened in our journey when we decided to start working with that. The first thing to say is that we wasted a lot of time when we decided to work with DEI, because we didn't have an experienced leader to deal with it. And things started changing when we hired a very mature people and operations manager. So I would say that if you want to work with it, be careful and choose the right person and someone who's very experienced. And we also had this idea that DEI was mostly about recruiting. And that is surely a big mistake. DEI is everybody's responsibility in the organization. And if you only have your human resources department taking care of it, you have the risk of creating a fake inclusive environment that can be very damaging. So for us, it became very clear that it was very crucial to raise a lot of awareness and make sure everybody would understand that there is no space for prejudice or any little offensive joke or microaggressions. Inclusiveness also became one of our culture pillars. So during our feedback cycle, we will discuss the following attitudes. So they are to be able to value and encourage diverse identities in the workplace, to be aware of unconscious bias, to recruit staff from minoritized groups, and to be proactive and speak out if people witness violations of our respect in the workplace policy. We also have many trainings, so one yearly training in terms of respecting the workplace for the whole team, mandatory racial equity training for all our leaders, and it's optional for anybody in the organization to also take them if they want. And as I mentioned before, cross-cultural training. So it is well known that the job market has a very big diversity gap between men and women, especially in leadership positions. So that was our initial focus. nowadays, we are proud to say that we are a women-led organization, as 87% of our leaders identify themselves as women. And when we look at management positions, it's even more, it's 91%. So now we started prioritizing Black, Indigenous, trans people, and people with disabilities in our positions. And getting into the road of DEI recruiting was surely not easy, so I will mention some things that we learned. So we had positions that were opened for over 1 year, even in countries where there is a very big share of the population that would fit this criteria. And we even worked with specialized consultancies, and they didn't bring very promising results, I would say. So we learned that with all the bias that minoritized groups suffer in the world, many people don't have the opportunity to learn a second language, which was something that was mandatory for all our positions. They cannot go to college. We often asked for a degree, or they don't even have the work experience they would like to have and deserve. So with that in mind, we became being more flexible, and we started evaluating potential, learning agility, and drive instead of experience only. So we also had to invest a lot in training. So people who entered the organization without experience or all the skills needed could develop themselves and thrive. We started communicating in 3 different languages, the most spoken ones in the organization, which are Portuguese, Spanish, and English. And we have plans to also do it in Thai and Bahasa, which is Indonesian. So the information that matters a lot is not lost in translation. And we also had to find a way to show that our organization was a safe place for these people to apply to the positions. And one thing that really worked was to start writing in our job descriptions that our positions had a preference or were exclusive to those groups. It surely worked, and we are able to find many more candidates now. It is an ongoing challenge for us, and we want to keep working on it, and we are doing many other things. So if anybody's interested, you could talk to our People and Operations Director about it. And we are very happy to say that we are now starting to see the results, and we feel confident that a multicultural, diverse, and inclusive workplace can bring better results. We are seeing more different perspectives, points of views, and ideas, generating new outcomes as well, and also a lot of learning and development opportunities. We are also very confident that this is helping us build a much stronger movement. We live in countries with a long history of injustice, prejudice, and discrimination. And we don't want to see a vegan movement that is only white and privileged. The change has to start inside ourselves. So you're probably wondering why I spend most of my time here talking about people. It is for a reason. Animals cannot help themselves. We need good people to help them. And one of our biggest lessons and challenges is to become better and better with people management is what consumes most of our efforts, I would say. Not most of them, we do a lot of campaigning as well, but we need people to be good at them. And we also learned that, especially in the countries where we don't need to look for people who are ready. We need people who are willing to join and who are willing to learn and to cultivate their own mindsets. And the key values that we are looking for would be to have positive, altruistic, healthy, and happy people to create engagement. So that's all. I look forward to the questions.
Thank you so much. Right now it's time for questions. We really encourage you to go to Eventory app and ask your questions, but we already have some prepared. You mentioned isolating negativity. How do you do that?
Yeah, I think that has to come from leadership. Leadership has to be very well trained to receive criticism and to receive concerns, but at the same time to try to guide people, to hope for something, to show them that it is possible to do what we are willing to do. Yeah, so I would say leadership is very important in this process. And also, as I said, we have the culture pillars, and we actually found out that there are some things that need to be changed in them, and positivity is one of them. So in the next feedback cycles, positivity will be discussed as an attitude that we want to cultivate.
Have you been accused of being foreign agents for using foreign funds for activities in some countries?
Not yet. I don't think people found out, luckily. No, not yet.
What are some best practices for leaders giving effective feedback in a multicultural team, considering feedback communication norms differ significantly between cultures?
Yeah, so our effective feedback process is based on nonviolent communication. So I'll try to explain it briefly. So with nonviolent communication, the first thing you have to say is to describe something as if you're watching a video. So for example, the things you can say, the facts you can state, have to match what you would see in a video. Like, you cannot say things that are not very clear or that are not very specific. So it has to have a lot of clarity when you are stating the facts. You also have to be able to bring some empathy and mention things like saying what are the problems or what are the difficult emotions that this type of behavior can create in whoever is interacting with you or inside the organization. And you finish the process by making a very clear request of how things could be different or how you expect things to be different.
How did you resolve the issue of bad value alignment in the organization?
How did we solve it?
Yeah, I believe so.
Yes. We could solve most cases by talking to people and asking them to revisit our strategic plan and discuss the plan with us if they wanted to. And we made it very clear that we would listen to them, but there were some values that were really important for us, and they should not expect them to change it, because people do have expectations that they will be able to change things, even when they're very new in the organization. So for most things, we were able to discuss it, and people understood it. And I don't know if they changed their minds, but now they are happy and engaged.
What do you mean by healthy in the requirements for employees mentioned at the end?
No, it wouldn't be a requirement. It's something that we want to see in our employees. We have a lot of, it often happens that we get people telling us that they are extremely tired, they cannot stop to have lunch, they work extra hours, they don't want to take holidays. So I think especially young people, they come with a lot of strength, and they don't have any skills in time management or wellness, for example. So we try to tell people to make the message very clear that they need to be healthy and to be balanced to be able to deliver good results. So we have clear policies kind of guiding them to be in this healthy state.
What are some best practices for leaders giving effective feedback in a multicultural team? Considering feedback communication, I'm sorry, this was already.
Yeah, I can say some things about the different cultures. I think one of the key things we learned when we did the cross-cultural training was that some cultures are very direct, and they can have very open conversations. Like, they're not scared of conflict, they like a debate. Some other cultures find that very challenging, and they're very indirect in the way they communicate. So when we interact with the cultures that are more indirect and that don't like confrontation so much or like being direct so much, we take more care, we ask more questions, we try to keep in mind that they will need some more incentives to speak.
What are the instruments which helped you while growing in terms of management, like CRM systems, special planners, or something else?
Yeah, I'm not very good with it, but we use many. So we use things like Slack. We don't use WhatsApp. In the beginning, we used WhatsApp. It was a nightmare. Yeah, people were texting in the middle of the night. That was very common. So no more WhatsApp. We encourage people not to use email as much as well internally. We focus everything on Slack. And we also use Monday, like to plan the activities and mark everybody who is responsible and add deadlines. That was very useful as well when we implemented it. And some teams will also use CRM for corporate engagement, for example. I think that these are the main tools that we use. I don't know if it answers the question. Yeah.
What would you say is the biggest challenge or issue right now when it comes to animal rights in the Global South?
Lack of awareness. Our societies are very little aware, so there is a lot of work to do. I think they're very sensitive as well to higher prices, both for higher welfare products and for industrialized vegan products. So, for example, we try to promote a vegan diet that is very natural with local ingredients, because for most people it will be very hard to afford some products. And we have some countries as well. I think pressure works really well in the West, but we have a lot of countries where companies do not respond to pressure. And yeah, that is an ongoing challenge.
Why have you chosen to work in several countries in spite of staying in one, but putting maximum efforts and creating bigger results?
Yeah, so I was working already in Brazil for a different organization. And we were talking to funders, and some of them were interested to see the movement expanding to other countries. And that's why we started with three to four. Very little was done in Brazil in the beginning, although the organization started there because we consider Brazil to be a less neglected country than the others. But our plan was really to be an organization that starts in different countries and brings and raises attention, and mothers will join, but not many others have joined where we are. But we kept the plan, and I think overall we are happy with it, I would say. Some of these countries are not so big, so they don't need very big teams as well. So yeah, we are still being able to work effectively. And one thing that really helps is that all the countries in Latin America, but Brazil, speak Spanish, so they work in a very coordinated way as well, like as one team, basically.
We have time for the last question. Do you think activists in Europe can help to introduce systematical changes in Global South? For example, by lobbying on the European level for an import ban of some animal products that are important from the Global South?
I don't know if I would work on a ban. I don't know what the person is referring to, but I think like initiatives like some European organizations are trying to get Europe not to import products that are produced under lower animal welfare standards. I think that's very helpful.
Okay, we actually have time for two more questions. How do you deal with repression for exposing the industry? Do you sometimes have to water down your message on purpose for safety reasons?
Yes. Some countries are more sensitive, and freedom of speech is, is more restricted, so we have to be careful. And also in terms of societies, what we found out is that not so much in Indonesia, but in Thailand, for example, if you are seen as an activist and you like confrontation and you like protesting, like society won't be on your side, so you have to do it in more subtle ways, I would say, like softer messaging, for example.
So what should a proper onboarding and training look like?
Yeah, so it will include all our policies, all the software tools we use, and videos on how to use them. And our teams have also developed manuals that are specific for their programs, and videos as well, like training videos. And there's also like the overall vision of the organization, what we do, which are like all the programs, getting in touch with people. We have a lot of one-to-one calls when people start, for example.
Thank you so much. Please once again give a round of applause.